My hair is still wet, but it's already been too long since I made a video, so we're just gonna get started. Hi everyone, my name is Maddie and welcome back to my channel, or thanks for joining us if you're new here. And I am aware that I have been in like MIA for the last month. I ended up getting COVID over the holiday season, and then between like coming back and getting settled back into school and my job and catching up on everything, I just needed a little bit of time to like catch up on everything before like I got to the point where I felt like I could make videos that I was like interested in making, because I didn't want to like force reviews and things that were like me like half dead, not committed to making the content. It's more fun for me. I hope it would be more fun for you. But with that being said, there was a ton of videos that I wanted to get done over the like winter holiday that I didn't get done, and I'm going to be playing catch up a little bit because there's definitely some books from last year that I didn't get to film reviews on that I want to film reviews on. And there's also lots of like end of the year stuff that I want to get to. And part of that is doing this video, which is going to be my top 10 books of 2021. As well, I'm going to do like a reading stats reaction to my Storygraph reading stats. And I didn't film my December wrap-up, so that has to come out at some point in time, even though it's already almost February. I am also hoping to bring back Webcomic Wednesdays soon, so stay tuned to hear some more information about that. But without further ado, let's dive back into talking about books. I've actually like really missed filming these, so it's nice to be back. So I didn't like rank them in terms of like 1 to 10 because it was hard enough picking my top 10, but I did pick a number 1. I can probably do like a top 3, so I'm gonna do everything else and then I'll do like the 3, 2, 1 countdown. One of my top 10 books this year was On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, which is by Ocean Vyung, whose name I am always convinced that I'm butchering. But this book is essentially written by the character who we only know as Little Dog, and it's written in letters to his mother. And it's him kind of reflecting on his life, what it's like been growing up with his like immigrant family. It's Vietnamese, as well as like navigating his own identity as a queer person and kind of his relation to the world. The author is a poet, so everything about it is just like gorgeous in the command of language that he has and like the exploration of the human experience. I know towards the end of the book, like I just had to stop writing down quotes because I was just like, I don't know, this entire chapter, just copy out that entire chapter, because that's how I annotate, and that was obviously not really feasible. But in particular, there is a character in this book who I believe his name is Trevor, and is one of, I think, the character, like Little Dog's first love, and who ends up falling into addiction, having some, some struggles, and the way that he writes about that relationship and what it means to love someone and watch them change, watch them struggle, and, lose that connection to them, but still like wish the best for them. There was so much in there that just like struck me from my own life and my own lived experience. It's this novel, the book is incredible, like you have to go out and read it, and I do have his poetry collection on my TBR because I just am in love with the way that he writes and how he figures out how to put things into words. Another book that I had on my top 10 was actually a nonfiction book, which like I wasn't surprised by, but when I was kind of like making my list of books that I thought would go in my top 10, I actually had a couple nonfiction. And this one's called Chasing the Scream, which is by Johann Hari. And I did do a video on this book and some other nonfiction books that I read about the opioid crisis, and I will be sure to link that up here if that is something that you want to check out, because this book deals with like the history of the drug war. The author is British, but it does like kind of go worldwide as he like goes to all these different countries and places and learns how they've approached their drug problem. There's quite a few, like all of the books that I read for that class I would recommend. Gabor Mate's book is incredible too. Johann Hari has this ability to kind of make you feel like you're sitting in the room with him and he is telling you a story, which I think is what we need. Literally all of the statistics prove that like we need to decriminalize drugs in order to like be able to manage and deal with the opioid crisis, but it's different when like you're getting that human perspective and you're getting that story alongside the statistics, and he does a really good job of drawing people into understanding that. It's a really wonderful exploration of how everything went wrong to understand how we got here, but also an exploration of like, okay, cool, now that we're in this state, where do we go from here? So I don't know why I keep saying I would recommend that you check this out. Obviously, if it's on my top 10, I'm recommending you check it out. I just don't know how to like segue into the next book, so we're just gonna do that. Next is The Project, which is by Courtney Summers. I did a reading spread and a review of this, which I think I did a video on, so I will link that up here. And she actually saw that and commented on it, which was really cool. The first Courtney Summers book that I read was Sadie, and The Project was the second book that I had read by her, and it like struck me in a way that I wasn't expecting. We follow Liv, who works kind of like as an intern for a journalist, and her sister has been missing, has been a part of this cult for quite some time, and she's lost connection with her. Essentially, we follow her as she tries to investigate the cult, track down her sister, and figure out what's going on, but at the same time, she's grappling with the trauma of everything that happened to her sister, and also the car accident that like took their parents from them, and that Liv was in, that ultimately led to the trauma that drove her sister to like becoming a part of the cult. And I think that's one of the things that this book does incredibly well, which I talk about in my review, is the way that it like gets you to sympathize with the cult leader. Like, it does such a good job of painting him as that charismatic leader, and he's pulling you into it at the same time he's pulling Liv into it. But also it just does this exploration of like how important human connection is, and how easy it is to forget about how quickly we can get lost when we lose that connection to the people around us. Next on my list, we have Take Me With You When You Go, which is actually one of the last books that I read this year, and I did a reading vlog on it that I will link up here. But it is written by David Leviathan, who wrote my favorite book of all time, probably one of my favorites, Two Boys Kissing, and Jennifer Neven, who did All the Bright Places. And it follows this brother and sister after the sister has run away from home and they're in an abusive household, and she's sending emails back home to her brother, and it's the emails back and forth between them the story's told. So obviously David Leviathan does the brother's perspective, and then she does the Jennifer Neven does the sister's perspective. Like, anytime that there's like letters or emails or something, it can be very hard to like try and communicate everything that you want to say in the emails without like making it seem forced, but that's something that they did really well. Another thing that I really loved about this book was the adults, that there were like actually people who like stepped up to the plate when something was going wrong, and like that wanted to be there to support the kids and to make sure that they had a safe household to return to. Also, this book does a really good job of looking at like trying to be a hero for the people around you when you're a kid, and you know, his sister really struggling with like, did I fail you, of like trying to be the big sister and protect you, but like also trying to navigate and understand the trauma that she is going through as well. It's an absolutely gorgeous book. I loved it. I'm so happy that I stumbled across it in the library, and I was going to say recommend you check it out, but I'm going to try and stop doing that. Next on my list, I have a Sean David Hutchinson book, which, are we surprised? I love Sean David Hutchinson. I just saw he has a new book coming out, but I haven't read his last newest one that came out, so I have some catching up to do. And this one is a complicated love story set in space, which I also did a reading journal layout for, and I will link the video for that up here as well. It follows Noah and DJ. I'm pretty impressed with how many character names I've been able to remember so far. And they wake up trapped on a spaceship. And there's someone else on the spaceship with them too, but I can't remember her name. And essentially they have no idea how they got there or what's going on and like what's happening. It's like sci-fi, but like also romance, but like also there's so many layers of like nuance, and my favorite thing about the story is kind of like the twist that comes, but obviously I can't talk about that because spoilers. This is a book about the power of being able to tell your own stories and have control of your own narrative, and Sean David Hutchinson does that in such an incredible way by like articulating all of these really big real world issues into this sci-fi world in a way that still feels very human, very relatable, very understandable. Yeah, it gutted me. You gotta read this one. You have to read this book. The last two that I have, and somebody might get mad at me over this, but we're gonna go with it. They're series. One of them I think I can pick my favorite of the two, but the other one I can't really. And I think like I have an easier time of ranking series when I'm comparing the books in the series to other books in the series than when I'm like comparing them to other books as a whole. With series, I do have a tendency to binge sometimes, especially if it's comics and I have access to all the volumes at once, but then that also makes it difficult for me to like differentiate what happened in each book. So I'll do the one that I can tell you which one's my favorite of the two first, and then we'll do the other one. So this is the Collector series, which is by John Hutchinson, and the first book is The Butterfly Garden, and the second book is The Roses of May. And I think I'm actually going to pick the second book as my favorite for this one. There are two more books in this series that I have not read yet, but the Butterfly Garden essentially follows, there's this man, the gardener, who kidnaps women, who he calls his butterflies, and tattoos butterfly wings on their back, and he keeps them in the garden. It takes place after they've all gotten out, and the FBI is talking to kind of the lead butterfly, or the girl that most of the girls confide in, to try and like piece together what has happened. So it's told between like her stories and her like recounting to these FBI agents. Then the second book has like the same FBI agents, but it follows like a completely different story. And it's about this young girl who, her older sister was killed by a serial killer who regularly kills girls in churches and then leaves them with like a particular type of flower. And he seems to kind of be following her and like almost kind of grooming her to be maybe the next victim. Like we don't really know what's going on, but she is trying to like grapple with the trauma of having lost her sister. And my phone ran out of space, but ultimately what's happening is he kills someone every spring, so they're grappling with the idea that like another woman's probably going to get killed, and trying to deal with like what does justice look like in this situation, and how is, you know, capturing him, finding him, like what does that resolve in terms of like the trauma that the family has endured and the people who have been lost. It is an incredible series. I wasn't sure how it was going to work with like the detectives kind of overlapping, but the fact that they don't like lean in too much into the detectives, and they let the people who are being impacted by it like actually be the focus of the story, I think is also really powerful. And the other way that they kind of tie this back to the first book is, I cannot remember her name, but that lead butterfly in the first book ends up writing to the girl in the second book as they kind of try and like have some of those conversations about, you know, justice or revenge, or like what does it mean to come to the end of this horrible thing that has happened and know that it's not going to change anything, or you're not going to get back anything that was lost. The second series I have is Finding Home, which I'm pretty sure I did cover in my webcomic Wednesdays, so I will include that up here. Shocking. It's almost like the books that I really like are the ones I talk about in videos. But this is my favorite webcomic series of all time. I stumbled across it by accident, and I was rereading some of like the new pages that are on Patreon the other day, and the way that this book handles recovering from like relationship trauma, being like in an emotionally manipulative, obvious, like there's all sorts of abuse adhered to this relationship, but particularly that like manipulation, like making you think things about yourself and the world around you, is just so beautifully done. The story follows Chepe and Yannick. I have no clue if I'm ever saying either of these characters' names right, but essentially they bump into each other on the road, and Chepe kind of says, "Oh, I'm going like the same way as you. I can help you get to where you're going," because Yannick's pretty lost. They end up traveling together, and as they're traveling together, they obviously become like much closer over time. Chepe is half Fae, so his like hair is like made up of vines and he can do magic and all of this cool stuff. But one of the really cool features of this comic is that different flowers and plants blossom in his hair when he feels different emotions. So, like, honestly, I think I read it once through the first time, then I went back the second time just to go through with the little flower guide and, like, pick out what he's feeling in different scenes from, like, another perspective, and there might be a different way of looking at that scene that I had missed the first time. But yeah, ultimately Chepe is reeling from this difficult relationship that he was in with a human who used him essentially like for clout, or for like kind of to be like this pretty, look at my like fae boyfriend. It's all awful. The whole thing is terrible, and Chepe's really trying to like grapple with that. And there's so much like growth in conversations throughout the entire thing. And one of the things that I really appreciate is this book is very like aware of actions that are taken because of a result of trauma without like forgiving them, if that makes sense. Like, it recognizes that the characters need to grow and like also be in a like mentally well state to like recognize that the things that they are doing aren't okay, but it also like doesn't excuse the harm that those actions they might be taking because they're hurting are impacting the people around them. The first 3 volumes, I'm pretty sure, is that's where they are on Tapas right now, are all out on Tapas, and then the 4th volume is currently going on, and it's going to be over, I think we still have quite some time, but it's going to be over eventually, and I'm going to cry when that happens because I love it so much, and it just really, really hits home with me in a lot of different ways. Okay, so that's my like 7, and now we've come to my top 3. Although, to be fair, you know what, to be honest, I think Finding Home would be my top 3, because my next book is A Little Life, and I genuinely don't know where to put this book. This book haunts me. Like, I don't know how else to articulate it, and like I genuinely can't decide if I love it or I hate it. So like maybe that should be my number 4, and Finding Home should be my number 3. Let's say that. But to talk more about A Little Life, one of the videos that I actually have on like my list of things to film is like a part 2 to my Little Life reading vlog, which I will link up here, because there's so much that I want to talk about, and especially because I did that spoiler free, that I just need to like get off my chest somewhere, and I'm thinking other people might be feeling the same way. Life follows 4 friends, but ultimately ends up focusing on Jude and Willem, and Jude has a very dark and troubled past that he is trying to learn how to live with and to wrap his head around, and it just follows the story of their life. Major content warnings for that book, because I think it has every trigger known to mankind, and it also does not like lightly touch on things. You get all of the details. There are parts of that book that like ruined me in a way that like almost feels psychologically traumatizing, that I don't know how to deal with. But there are also parts of that book that, like, are a perspective that I have never got to read or see myself represented in a way that is a whole other thing, too. So, I don't know. If you've read that book, let me know what you think. But yes, I will definitely be doing another video on it, because, like, I can't lie that that book has not impacted me, which is like what writing is supposed to do, but I can't tell you if it's a good or a bad way it's impacted me. I don't know. My number 2 book for this year was Under the Whispering Door by T.J. Klune, and I just read a book by T.J. Klune that I hated, which I'm very upset about, because the other 2 books, all the other books I've read by him, I've loved. And this one was my favorite. I wasn't sure if I was going to get into the pre-order campaign, but I did end up doing that, so I have a lovely poster of the characters in my room. But Under the Whispering Door is an incredible story about grief. Follows Wallace, who is this lawyer who's kind of a bit of a dick, and he dies. And he finds himself being led by a reaper to this little quirky tea shop in the middle of the outskirts of this town. And there he meets Hugo. Hugo is the tea shop's owner to the locals, but he also works as a ferryman to help souls who need to cross over. And Wallace is understandably not having a very good time about being dead, so Hugo really does a lot of work to help him cope with that and to cope with, like, grief. But also there's, like, other souls coming through as this passes along, and Hugo's own life experience and Wallace's life experience with life and death that gets brought to this narrative. It is gorgeous. I have never read a book that deals with grief so well. This is a book that I want to do a more full review on. There is one chapter that I just, like, I'm getting emotional now. I just sobbed when I read it. I had to put the book down. It just, like, touched me so deeply as somebody who has lost a lot of people in my life and lost a lot of people to very different types of death. The way that this book navigates not only grief, but, like, different types of grief, like how it is different to lose someone to murder than it is to lose someone to a terminal illness, and, like, finally having that articulated in a way that, like, made me feel like I wasn't crazy, and, like, also helped to, like, heal and allow myself to, like, recognize all those really difficult emotions that I had was beautiful. For anyone who has ever lost someone, or we're all going to lose someone someday, like, you need to read this book to help you be able to better navigate life and death and, like, cope with your own emotions. I did have a different perspective on how the book was going to end, and that's particularly why I kept this one in my number 2, but I have so much more that I want to say on it. Particularly, I went and virtually saw TJ Klune answer some questions on this. His response to my question was brilliant, so I do want to touch on that too, but I think that needs to be a video of its own, so I'm adding that to the very long list of videos I need to catch up on. And with that, we are down to my number 1, which is The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. This follows Charlie and Dev, character names, and it takes place on this show called Ever After, which is kind of like The Bachelor, and Charlie has come to be on this show. He's like a tech whiz who's just lost his job, and he's kind of hoping this will, like, help get him back into the game. And Dev is his handler, so it's basically, like, helping him move around and everything. So basically they bring him on, and then there's all these, like, women, and the idea is at the end of the show he proposes to one of them. I think that's how it works. I don't know, I don't watch reality TV. Which is why I was not, like, expecting to like this book. This is another one that I need to do a full review on. And of course, over the course of the novel, Charlie finds himself falling in love, but not with any of the contestants, with his handler Dev, who he has befriended over the course of filming. It is a wonderful queer love story. One of my favorite things about it is it does a great job of dealing with the, like, you don't have to have it all figured out question, and there's nothing wrong with that, and, like, being willing to have open dialogue about a lot of different things about that. It is a really good critique of reality TV, and, like, villain tropes, and all of the, like, messy, complicated problems that come along with that, and, like, with the producers who are trying to tell, like, one type of love story or one type of narrative on television, and the issues with that. Critiques the idea of a happily ever after, particularly for Dev, who is, like, kind of obsessed with this unrealistic fairy tale idea of love. And it is also an amazing exploration of mental health and mental illness and navigating that within a relationship, because Dev has depression and he is really struggling to even admit that that is something that he is dealing with. And Charlie has anxiety and is having a hard time feeling like that's not something that, like, makes him less or makes him more difficult to be around because of experiences in his life. I did not think I was going to like this book when I picked it up. I think that's on me for being a little judgmental of romances and being like, oh, this is just going to be something, like, fluffy and silly. It's going to be too cheesy, like, I'm not going to like it. And there is so much layer and depth in this story. And in particular, the thing that got me to pick it up was, like, the conversations about asexuality and asexual representation in this book, which also just, like, guts me anytime that I see it anywhere. And it was just beautiful. Everything about it was wonderful. In, like, my annotation style, I, like, filled up so many pages of my notebooks. Like, my hand was, like, cramping from trying to, like, copy down so many quotes, because there was just so much that resonated with me, and so much that, like, Alison Cochrane was able to, like, have these really honest, healthy communications in such a beautiful and empowering way. Okay, this video is getting long, so I'm gonna have to wrap it up now. You can tell I've been dying to talk about books to people. I just read the new issue of Saga this morning and I have no one to talk to about it, and it's killing me. It's fine. So if you've read any of those books, please feel free to share your thoughts on it down below, or tell me what your top 10 books were of 2021. I am really looking to try and find some more books because I'm getting a little too caught up on my TBR, which is a little odd. So if anyone has recommendations, I would be more than happy to hear them. Other than that, stay kind, and I will see you all in the next video.